The UK has had a long obsession with murder and murders within country estates. Ever since the educational programmes created widespread literacy in the United Kingdom, we've always bloody loved a good murder. Sherlock Holmes, Agatha Christie, The Moonstone, and it even continues today with Midsummer Murders, Jonathan Creek, and 24 Hours in Police Custody. Oh yeah, it's always better when it's real murder. Back in the day, the Victorian broadsides were always about grisly true crimes, and as the novel rose to prominence, the murder mystery became the dish of the day. 1 in 8 books printed in the 1930s in the United Kingdom was a crime novel. And what if you could take that core concept of a murder mystery novel, the whodunit, or more correctly, the who has done this, into your home in a board game fashion with a cycle of different endings, and you get to be the Sherlock Holmes that figures it all out? I am of course talking about Cluedo, or Clue to our American viewers, but Cluedo is the correct name, which has been around since the 1940s and is still popular to this day. True story, we've actually struggled to get hold of a copy of the game for this video because it's sold out everywhere over the Christmas period. Amazon don't have it, Zatu don't have it, we've had to get it from eBay and it hasn't arrived. Families who grew up playing the game are now getting to play it again with their kids just as their parents did, and that cycle will continue. But is Cluedo actually good? The Second World War was a combination of terrifying and boring. Sure, there was always the imminent threat of death from above, but on the days where we weren't having our chippies bombed, there was a curfew and no one was allowed out. No idea what that would be like. So instead you just sat indoors, listened to the wireless read books about murder and played board games. This was the life of Anthony Pratt, a musician who was working in a munitions factory in Birmingham. He and his wife Elva worked on the original version of Cluedo in 1944, then named Murder with an exclamation mark at the end to make it more emphatic, with Anthony creating the deduction-based card-playing system that is still in effect today, while Elva, a skilled amateur painter, designed the board. Originally, there were bloody loads of characters, some of which are actually still with us today. There was Dr. Black, Mr. Brown, Mr. Gold, Reverend Green, Miss Grey, Professor Plum.
Sorry, Death, you lose. It was Professor Plum.
Miss Scarlet, Mrs. Silver, Nurse White, and Colonel Yellow. In addition to weapons like the knife, which we now know today as the dagger, there was also the axe, the poker, syringe, poison, and a bomb. You know, a bomb being one of the most subtle murder weapons in history.
Some days you just can't get rid of a bomb.
The name Cluedo was a suggestion by Waddingtons, who bought the game from the Pratts in 1945 and is a mixture of Clue and Ludo, the name of a popular game of dice rolling and moving around the board. The reason the game is called Clue in the US when it was released there by Parker Brothers was because Americans don't call Ludo Ludo and instead call it Parcheesi.
Does anybody want to play Parcheesi?
I guess Clue Cheesy isn't as snappy a title. The game was simplified by removing some characters like Mrs. Silver, Mr. Gold, Miss Grey, and Mr. Brown because, as Quentin Tarantino once eloquently put it,
That's a little too close to Mr.
certain weapons were axed, including the axe, and the weapon lineup was changed to the candlestick, rope, revolver, dagger, lead pipe, and wrench. Nurse White became Mrs. White, and Colonel Yellow became Colonel Mustard so as not to associate with a military general and cowardice. Poor old Dr. Black became the game's victim. Over in the US, Parker Brothers, the home of Monopoly, initially refused to sell the game because they had a rule that their wholesome family games could not involve unwholesome, unfamily things like murder. Now, crushing the underclass with the boot of capitalism though, now that is family wholesomeness. They did eventually cave and struck a deal with the Conan Doyle estate to market Clue as the great new Sherlock Holmes game, despite the fact that Sherlock at no point features in Clue, until the Sherlock branded version of the game of course. They also made some changes like making Reverend Green Mr. Green because no one from the clergy would be capable of crime, and making Mr. Black Mr. Body. Lol. Though Waddingtons bought the rights to the game in 1945, it wasn't published until 1949 due to short supplies because of a certain world war, and sales during the 1950s were pretty good. Good enough that the game's publishers convinced the Pratts to accept a one-off payment of $5,000 for rights outside of the UK and royalties within the UK until the patent expired in 1967. And while $5 was nothing to be sniffed at back in the day, the game sales picked up in the 60s and 70s and made Parker Brothers and Waddington's millions upon millions. The Pratts sadly saw none of this money, their finances meeting a similar fate of Dr. Black, killed by a publisher in a boardroom with a legally binding contract. Marcia Davis, Anthony and Elva's daughter, has since said that it would have been nice for her parents to get more recognition, noting that Anthony Pratt wasn't credited as the creator of Cluedo until after his death. She said in an interview, "I feel sad about that. If he'd known better or been better advised in the 50s, his final years would have been more comfortable." What's interesting about the board game politics of Cluedo, however, is that Waddington's used it as leverage to get the UK rights to Monopoly, which was owned by Parker Brothers over in the US, because Parker Brothers could have got a much better deal from a much bigger company, but Waddington's essentially turned and said to them, "Well, if you do, we're just going to revoke your US rights to Cluedo." And I mean, that was a bit of a problem for Parker Brothers. A problem that was solved in the early 90s when Hasbro bought Waddington's, and then Hasbro bought Parker Brothers too, so they actually just owned both games. Problem solved.
Yay, capitalism!
Even before Hasbro got their plastic toy hands on it though, Cluedo was already a global brand. Many people watching this will be well aware of the 1985 movie, which is absolutely terrific, with a brilliant comedy cast including Tim Curry, Madeline Kahn, Christopher Lloyd and Michael McKean, from My Cousin Vinny director Jonathan Lynn. Brilliantly like the game, the movie had a different ending depending on where you saw it because they filmed 3 different conclusions. The DVD release featured an option to randomize which ending you get. A remake of the movie was announced in 2018 with names like Ryan Reynolds, Jason Bateman and Muppets director James Bobbitt attached, but nothing has been heard about it since. It was turned into a game show here in the UK that aired in the early 90s with Doctor Who himself, Tom f***ing Baker.
You realize what we're saying? You can't let him leave the house.
Over in the US in 1985, Clue was turned into a VHS game that was as popular as the home entertainment release of Ghostbusters, aka the greatest movie ever made, but one of the shittest board games I've ever played. All of which were better than the 1995 Clue the Musical, which incredibly was not called a Cluesical. Come on, it's right there! Audience members picked 3 cards that were locked away and then revealed at the end of the night, which you'd think would make for some fun improv, but apparently it was always Professor Plum that did it. Sorry spoilers, and apparently it was shit. Also was a TV miniseries from 2011 where these Scooby-Doo teens solved mysteries, no thanks. And of course there's comic books, video games, point-and-click adventure games, novels themselves, and Nerf even released a Cluedo branded gun called the Clue Elimination because Hasbro. There have, of course, been dozens upon dozens of branded versions of Cluedo, from Game of Thrones, Downton Abbey, Rick and Morty, because of course Rick and Morty have Cluedo, Walking Dead, Harry Potter, and even The Simpsons. Bloody hell, who gets murdered in The Simpsons? Right, Mr. Burns, yeah, that actually does make a lot of sense. There's also been some variations on the game like Super Cluedo Challenge and Cluedo the Museum Caper, but the game got a huge facelift in 2008 with Clue Discover the Secret, which moved the action from a country manor to an LA mansion with new characters like the famous Cassandra Scarlett and football player Jack Mustard. Honestly, it sounds like the most
How do you do, fellow kids?
version of Cluedo I've ever heard. It even features billionaire video game designer Victor Plum, who, let's be honest, probably did it. He crunched Dr. Black to death in the office with unreasonable development times. In the end, a 2016 facelift finally stuck, which returned Cluedo to its country manor setting, but with one final twist, killing off Mrs. White and replacing her with Dr. Orchid, the adopted daughter of victim Dr. Black, having been expelled from her Swiss boarding school after a suspicious poisoning incident. Joe from London had a totally normal one about this news on the Daily Mail website, writing, "It's because of her name, PC gone mad again!" So that's a bit of history about the game, but how does it actually play? There's been a murder and only 3 to 6 players can solve it. Dr. Black's murder was committed by 3 cards, a suspect, a weapon and a location. A card is taken at random from each category and placed into an envelope that gets placed in the middle of the board. The cards that aren't in this envelope are dealt among the other players, so everyone has a different idea of which cards aren't the killer weapon or location. But of course you'll need information, so on your turn you roll dice and go into different rooms in the house. Once there, you can make an accusation about a certain someone murdering Dr. Black with a certain murder weapon in the room you're currently in. "I think it was Miss Scarlet in the dining room with the candlestick," you shout. Starting with the player on your left, if someone has one of those 3 cards, they show it to you and no one else, and you make a note of that on your detective notepad. Once you've eliminated all possibilities, you race to the center of the board to make your final proclamation. It was Miss Scarlet in the dining room with the candlestick. Get it right and you've won, but get it wrong and you're out of the game. Off the bat, you can see there are some good mechanics, some of which still hold up by today's standards of tabletop playing. The deduction element is really good, and making your own private note as you race towards the conclusion makes you feel like you're a proper detective. There's also some elements of bluff. You can ask about cards that you know are in your hand, because that way you know they're not in the middle, but you could lead others into thinking they are. And if you have 2 cards of the accusation made, you only have to show one of them. Furthermore, you can show the same piece of information you've shown before. All of this totally works and makes Cluedo a fun deduction game. That moment where you finally pick up that final crucial piece of information gives you an adrenaline rush because you don't know how close everyone else is coming to that same conclusion. So it's a shame that it is marred by rolling dice and player elimination. Like, yeah, it's no fun if you guess wrong and you're out of the game and then you have to sit there while everyone else gets to continue their investigation. And part of that is on you for going early, but unlike Monopoly, where you can walk away from the table and go and get a drink or check your Twitter DMs, you have to stay for Cluedo because you need to share your information. But really, it's the dice and movement that has hurt Cluedo after all these years. If you can't tell, we did eventually get a copy of Cluedo through the post, but it's appears to be a knockoff version of Cluedo. I mean, it is called Cluedo, but we're basically lucky it's not called Bluedo. If you are going to buy a copy of Cluedo, make sure you do get an official copy. 6. The way you gather information and make accusations is to move around the mansion and enter rooms. In order to do that, you have to roll dice. So you're totally at the mercy of a dice number that is totally based on chance. If you roll low a lot and everyone else rolls high, you're constantly behind. There are hidden passageways, but you still need to get to the hall at the end of the game. Heading from one side of the mansion to the other is painfully slow. Just turn after turn of rolling dice, moving and waiting to roll again. And that is without taking into account the single worst design flaw of the game. Because you see, the characters you play are also the suspects. So if you make an accusation in a room, the player you're accusing is teleported to your location. So if you're playing as the prime suspect, which again is a game of chance because the cards are picked at random, you could be dragged halfway across the board because Auntie Marisha hasn't worked out that it wasn't Miss Scarlet. Stop dragging me back to the billiard room. And guess what? You don't teleport back, which means you have to start your slow journey all over again. Thankfully, updated versions of the game come with 2 dice. Imagine trying to play Cluedo with just 1. And there are special cards that you can get if you do roll a 1, which might help your case. But even with that, you can still run into a situation where you know where you need to be, but Auntie Marisha keeps dragging you back to the billiard room because she hasn't worked out it's clearly Colonel Mustard. But going by the poll we put on Twitter, 78.8% can overlook these annoyances and focus on the good the game brings to the table.
It's never boring to get a bunch of friends together to figure out who the killer is. It's a classic game of deduction and was one of my first board games.
Before social deduction, there was deduction, and Cluedo led the way. All the hidden role games, Avalon, Secret Hitler, etc., build on this game in that you have cards that no one else knows about and must decipher in order to win. It's the godfather of most of your favourites.
It's definitely the most interesting and replayable, and can be a good gateway to more interesting concepts like Betrayal at House on the Hill or Werewolf.
It hasn't aged well in the age of werewolf and secret Austrian painter, but it did lead to what social deduction games are right now. Good, but not as good as many newer games of the genre.
Roll and move is a bad mechanic, but otherwise it's a pretty solid deduction game.
If played right, it teaches kids, the target audience, simple deduction and can open up to a world of other games.
I've not played Cluedo in a long time, but I do have a lot of fond memories playing it as a youngster with my family around the Christmas period, and I do remember enjoying that a lot more than things like Monopoly, Trivial Pursuit and Game of Life. But how will it stand up when I play it as a 35-year-old against Laurie Blake, Adam Blampied and Blair Shepherd?
Welcome to our playthrough of Cluedo. I'm joined by Adam, Blair and Laurie. We're playing Cluedo on our phones because we're all in different areas of the country, lockdown and that. Adam, you're in charge of this, although Blair, I think you need to confirm. You need to tap when ready, mate.
Tap when ready,
yes,
Blair?
I wasn't sure if we were ready, so are we ready?
I've done my intro now, Blair. I guess we're ready.
All right, lovely.
It's the update, mate.
Stopped.
Is it really?
What's
happening? This big flashy intro. We're going into the manor.
Here we go. Whoa!
Whoa, you guys.
Why is that happening?
Haha, Scarlet doesn't go first. Green goes first.
Wait,
I'm
what?
going first. I'm going.
Miss Scarlet goes first. That's the way I chose the platinum blonde.
No, they did a dial, mate.
Here I go. Where am I gonna go? Let's see. What cards do I have?
That's a high roll.
Nice. That is a high roll. We're off to a flying start.
All right, let's go there.
Where's she going? Bloop. Bloop. Bloop, bloop, bloop.
Crikey, she's made it there already.
Blair is deciding what to suggest.
All right, and I think it is... Okay, let's see. I think it's that and...
You do say out loud, by the way.
Okay.
One of the chief tenets of Cluedo is you saying who you're accusing.
I think it is Scarlet with a dagger in the conservatory.
Me? You thought I did it?
Yes.
Someone as beautiful as me?
Yes.
Oh, I can help you with that, Blair.
Is it not?
There you are. I've sent you a card.
Oh, wow. Okay. Ooh. Well, it's not that then.
Well, early doors, the functionality is very good.
Right, there we go. Let's roll them bones. Okay, 6. I can probably do something with that. Where do I want to go? What? Okay.
Where's he gonna go?
Which way did he go?
Ah!
Bloop. Boop.
Bloop.
Look at her move.
Wow.
So sultry, those movements.
So grand.
She is beauty.
Where
is this supposed to be?
I'm in the hall.
The hall?
No, I mean like the whole...
It's a Tudor manor.
Tudor manor. Of course.
All right.
We Brits bloody love him.
Suggesting me, dagger, hall. Luke can't help. You can't help. Blair can't help.
Did you find it? Is this it?
In my turn.
Oh my god.
Oh my god.
Okay, roll dice.
So
Let's
why
get
didn't
somewhere.
you do a final accusation there?
Oh, I didn't want the game to be over.
That's because he is Shifty Magoo, and he doesn't think it was Scarlet all along.
Ooh, I'll never tell.
Okay, I can get quite far, you guys. I'm going
Excellent.
to...
The kitchen?
The kitchen. So, I j'accuse Meadowbrook in the kitchen.
Who's Meadowbrook?
With the... let me just quickly double check my shit here. With the candlestick.
Da da da.
Suggest. J'accuse.
Meadowbrook. Why is she here?
Who are you? Oh, this funky game with its updated characters.
Have a little look at that.
Thank you
there
kindly.
You go, Mr. Plum.
Thank you kindly. End my turn.
Just for everyone's reference, I did press end turn as soon as it offered it to me.
It's fine, mate.
It just took a while.
Dude, I think you were fine. I think you were pretty snappy.
Thank you.
It's a big 4, Blair.
Oh! I can't go anywhere. That sucks. Alright. Look at me hopping.
What a turn.
Wow.
There she goes.
I think it's nuts that even though you're standing in the hall and everyone's just mooching around room to room going, is it you with that? You can't just do it in the hall.
Okay. Which of these do I want to go to? Yes, I'll go to that one. Out of my way, Green.
Wow, rude. So rude.
Adam is
That is a fancy as dining room.
All right, hit me.
Peacock with
Really
the
going
rope.
for Peacock.
Mit das Rope.
Okay.
Final accusation time, I think.
What? No! Oh no!
I believe it was
My God.
Miss Scarlet with the rope in the dining room.
Wow.
Did I get it right?
You get Miss Scarlet.
Hey!
We haven't seen it yet.
Oh, I got it right.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay.
Hey!
So, yeah, what does everyone think of Cluedo? Would you
I
play
want,
again?
I want to play the physical board game, I think. I think there are elements to it that I definitely, I get. Like, I do think that it is fun, but I think there is something to be said about playing it in the physical form rather than online with all the animations and stuff, and you're just like, come on, end the turn. I think if you eliminated all of that, I would have had more fun than I did.
I think as
Also
well.
feel like it's.
Oh, go for it, mate.
I also feel like it's harder to track what you've learned when
Yeah.
you haven't got like the piece of paper in front of you with everything, and like because like with like you kind of like crossing everything off as you go, right, and like making little markings of when people suggest other things, but like because you're also watching the screen, you don't have your notepad there at all times. So I felt like I wasn't really making any notes.
I think it I wonder if it would work better without the board and the dice aspect, and if it was just a card game that was just, you know, asking questions to try and deduce who's holding what. Because I think that's obviously the most fun bit, and what's sort of kind of annoying about it is you end up just making moves pointlessly and then changing your plan halfway through because someone else has done something, and then you get confused. And yeah, I don't know. I feel like it'd be easy to stick to a sort of line of investigation if you just were just going around systematically saying, is it the dining room? Is it this room? Is it this room? I don't think it takes anything away from the game necessarily. It just removes the frustration of being like, I'm stuck in the hall for no reason.
Yeah, it's weird. Like the stuff that makes it a board game is the stuff that makes Cluedo bad for me. Because like the thing I love about Cluedo is I do actually quite like the racing element, but only when it's deduction based, not luck based. Because that's super frustrating. Like if the reason you lost a race is a dice roll, that sucks. If the reason you lost a race is you weren't making the right deductions, that's fine. That's the game. And like in that regard, yeah, Cluedo's a card game. It's not a board game.
I share the sentiment of my fellow players there. I think my enjoyment of the game was hampered somewhat by the clunky mobile version of Cluedo, but I do think there is a solid amount of good game within Cluedo. Laurie and Adam both suggested that it's a card game that is stuck in a board game mold, and the two don't really mix. In that game just then, had Blair made it to the room before Adam, she likely would have won, but the dice roll meant that she was stuck on the outside, only being able to look in on someone else's victory. I mean, it wasn't the best gaming experience I've ever had, but I do kind of put that more on the mobile version of Cluedo than I do on Cluedo as a game. I actually didn't mind the moving around the board bit, really, but that might just be because no one at any point ever thought it was Plum, so I was never being dragged around the board. Adam knew from the very beginning that it was Miss Scarlet, so he was quite happy to be zipped around the place. But overall, I think Cluedo holds up so much better than a lot of other classic games. It's a lot less clunky than Monopoly. It's so much more easier to understand, which is impressive as it's a lot more complicated of a game than just buying stuff and then running out of money. Yeah, the deduction aspect could be tightened up, but it's been improved by other games of its ilk. It's far from perfect, but yeah, I do think that Cluedo is actually good, or at a base level, it's better than Monopoly.